Just remember this, Mr. Potter. This rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Was it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? My father didn't think so. People are human beings to him. But to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're just cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be. Perhaps Jimmy Stewart's best known and best loved character is George Bailey, who stands up to the greedy Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. George thinks he's wasted his life, cooped up in the shabby little building and loan office, counting pennies instead of building skyscrapers, and organizing rubber drives instead of going to war. But when he's at the end of his rope, the whole town rushes to his rescue, a town full of people whose lives are far richer because George Bailey lived each ordinary day honorably, with faith in God and with selfless concern for others. George Bailey is just one of the scores of down-to-earth American heroes Jimmy Stewart brought to life, projected 50 feet tall on movie screens and etched into our memories. During a film career that spanned 50 years, he gave us vivid portraits of decency, tenacity, passion, and courage in all walks of life, from businessmen, lawyers, clerks, and reporters to soldiers, athletes, farmers, and cowboys. At one time or another, Jimmy Stewart played you, and he played you just the way you'd like to be played, as an everyday American who loves his country, who does his duty, and who lives an ordinary life with extraordinary integrity. But Jimmy Stewart didn't just give us great movie characters. He lived a great life. On screen and off, Jimmy Stewart showed us what a great American looks like. As Charlton Heston said, he was the quintessence of the American. If we're not like Jimmy Stewart, we would like to be. So first, let's meet just a few of my favorite Stewart heroes, and then let's get to know the man himself. A modest hero every bit as inspiring as those who portrayed on the silver screen. We've already met George Bailey. Much later in life, Jimmy Stewart gave us the lonely custodian Willie Krueger in the short film Mr. Krueger's Christmas. Mr. Krueger is alone with his cat on Christmas Eve, in a scene Stewart wrote himself, a scene that shines with simple, genuine faith. Mr. Krueger, hunched over his nativity set, imagines himself in the Bethlehem stable beside the manger. I'm Willie Krueger, and I'm custodian over at the Beck Apartments, but you know that. Thank you for everything you've done for me. As long as I can remember, you've been right by my side. I've always been able to count on you. You were right there, every time. I knew that you cared for me. I love you. You are my closest, my finest friend. Thank you. Thank you. Of all the characters populating Jimmy Stewart's movies, none can compare with Elwood P. Dowd for simple kindness. In the movie Harvey, we meet Elwood and his best friend, a 6-foot invisible rabbit. Although everyone thinks Elwood is insane, they're all better for having crossed his path. He brightens the lives of everyone he encounters and restores their faith in humanity. Elwood P. Dowd shows us that it's less about your brains than about your heart. As he explained to the doctor of the sanitarium where his sister is trying to have him committed, years ago my mother used to say to me, in this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart, or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. You may quote me. In Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart gives us an unforgettable picture of an idealistic young man who is unexpectedly sent to Congress and finds himself fighting a massive, corrupt political machine. Senator Jefferson Smith's love for his country is infectious. As he struggles to dictate his first piece of legislation to his secretary, he gets stuck, until he glances out the window at the city of Washington, D.C. That's what's got to be in it, the Capitol Dome. You see, boys forget what their country means by just reading the land of the free in history books. Liberty's too precious a thing to be buried in books. Men ought to hold it up in front of them every single day of their lives and say, I'm free to think and to speak. My ancestors couldn't. I can, and my children will. Mr. Smith became such a symbol of liberty that the Nazis poured vast resources into eradicating it from the face of the earth, while French resistance fighters risked their lives to hoard a few precious copies and keep it playing in secret throughout the war. The Nazis knew there was not room enough in the world for both them and Mr. Smith. Jimmy Stewart's movie characters also included real-life American heroes. Men like legendary big band musician Glenn Miller, who chose service to his country over a glamorous career at the cost of his life. Men like Chicago White Sox pitcher Monty Stratton, who lost his leg in a hunting accident but fought his way back to a successful career. And men like Charles Lindbergh, who winged his way from New York to Paris in the spirit of St. Louis as the world held its breath. Crowds flocked to theaters to watch Jimmy Stewart portray these men they admired. And there was a reason for that. Nobody could portray an American hero quite like Stewart. Maybe because Jimmy Stewart himself truly was an American hero. We love each one of the 80 memorable movie heroes he gave us. And the things we love most in them, we find in Jimmy Stewart himself. Jimmy Stewart was, first and foremost, a man of duty. He came from a line of men who had served in every American war since the Revolution. A year before Pearl Harbor, to the extreme dismay of MGM Studios, Jimmy Stewart volunteered to join the U.S. Army Air Corps. The lanky actor was turned down because he was 10 pounds underweight. After months of trying in vain to fatten himself up, he was drafted. This time he convinced the doctor to suppress his weight and was accepted. He often said afterwards that the draft was the only lottery he ever won. For months, the Army Air Corps kept him safely in the United States, in spite of the fact that he was a skilled pilot who had logged hundreds of flying hours. The Pentagon couldn't stand the thought of sending America's favorite movie star into harm's way, but Stewart pulled strings until he put him into action. His military service could fill a book, and it does fill Star Smith's book, Jimmy Stewart, Bomber Pilot. Stewart flew B-24s in 25 combat missions over Germany and occupied Europe. He was not required to fly these missions with his men, but he found ways around the rules so that he could fly more missions than Air Corps regulations allowed. He said, "I just can't sit here and send these fellas to death without knowing myself what I'm sending them into." He was a leader who inspired confidence in his fellow airmen in battle, and won the respect of the officers above him. One of his flight crew members said, "I knew that when I had 10 missions, Jimmy Stewart would phone 5 of them alongside me." And General Hodges said, "I feel better when Stewart is leading. We always seem to have a good day." In the citation for the Distinguished Flying Cross Stewart received for his raid on Brunswick, General Doolittle said, "The courage, leadership, and skillful airmanship displayed by Major Stewart were in large measure responsible for the success of this mission." Stewart earned a second Flying Cross, as well as 4 Air Medals and the French Croix de Guerre. After the war, Stewart stayed in the reserves and retired as a brigadier general. Jimmy Stewart was a man who overflowed with a fervent love for America. His patriotism is writ large in his own military service, but it was also evident as he visited the troops in Vietnam and supported his son Ronald, who was later killed in action there. It's clear in the work of the American Spirit Foundation he created to support emerging democracies. And you can hear his overwhelming pride in his country in the radio broadcast celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Bill of Rights. His voice chokes as he says, "The words are dim, but not the meaning of the words. The pens that put this down are dust, but not the marks they made. These 10 amendments are not dusty statutes. They're a pep talk to the fighters and a fortress to the undefended. They are a freestyle ode to liberty, 10 verses long." Jimmy Stewart was also a man of great personal character and integrity. Hollywood never made a dent in his values or tarnished his reputation, and everyone around him understood that there was something different about him, something they wanted. Although few in Hollywood applied those standards to their own lives, they all knew they should. Jeffrey O'Brien, in the Jimmy Stewart story, called Stewart a Boy Scout in Gomorrah, and wrote, "The myth is close to the reality. The scandal of Stewart's life is the absence of scandal." And President Truman said, "If Bess and I had a son, we'd want him to be just like Jimmy Stewart." Despite his stature in the first rank of stars in Hollywood's golden age, and despite his brilliant military service record, Jimmy Stewart stands out as a humble man. He gave interviews reluctantly and downplayed his accomplishments. He refused to capitalize on his status as a war hero, insisting that his movie contracts prevent press agents from mentioning his military service at all. In James Stewart, A Wonderful Life, Johnny Carson asked Jimmy Stewart how he wanted to be remembered. Stewart answered, "As a guy who believed in hard work and decent values, love of country and love of family, love of community and love of God." And so he is. Jimmy Stewart was indeed the quintessential American. He died in 1997 at the age of 89. But George Bailey, Willie Kruger, Elwood P. Dowd, Senator Jefferson Smith, and a host of other great Stewart heroes will be with us forever. He speaks his very last words on screen as Sheriff Wiley Burke, a dog in the animated movie An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. The young mouse Fievel says he's not a hero like Wiley. In that slow, distinctive drawl, Stewart replies, "Maybe not. Maybe a real hero's the last one to hear about it. Just remember this, Fievel. One man's sunset is another man's dawn. I don't know what's out there beyond those hills, but if you ride yonder, head up, eyes steady, heart open, I think one day you'll find that you're the hero you've been looking for."